All right, so get this. Imagine trying to make like a huge decision, like where to build a new hospital.
Right. Okay.
But all the information you have is totally outdated or just wrong, like completely wrong.
Wow.
And it turns out that even like the smartest AI can trip over this.
Really?
And the problem is this thing called metadata.
It's funny you should use that example because today's deep dive is actually based on a document from Sweden all about how their government's trying to use AI to make these kinds of decisions.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and they're making a really big point about how accurate metadata is like super critical.
I bet.
Maybe even more so when AI comes into play.
Okay, so before we go too far, can we just like back up for a second and just define what metadata is? Because I think some of us haven't spent our whole day like digging through databases.
Think of it like this. You know how every book has a cover with the title and the author and a little summary? That's metadata for the book itself.
Oh, okay.
It tells you what to expect, helps you find it on the shelf, gives you a sense of what's inside.
Okay.
Metadata for data is the same idea. It's data about data.
Data about data.
It tells us things like where the data came from, when it was collected, what it represents, how accurate it is, all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. So, okay, it makes sense. But why is this metadata stuff so important for AI? Like, isn't AI supposed to be like all-knowing and super smart?
Well, AI, it may seem magical, but even the most advanced algorithms are only as good as the data that they're fed.
That's true.
You know, without accurate metadata, AI is essentially flying blind. It might be crunching numbers and making predictions, but if the underlying data is flawed, the results are going to be unreliable at best.
So it's like trying to bake a cake with a recipe that says, like, add sugar.
Yeah.
But doesn't tell you how much. You might end up with something sweet. But it's not going to be the cake you were hoping for.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks.
And when we're talking about things like city planning, healthcare decisions, allocating resources, getting the recipe wrong can have some pretty big consequences.
For sure.
Which brings us back to this Swedish document.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because they're not just like theorizing here.
Right.
They're actually laying out real-world examples of what happens when metadata goes wrong.
Exactly.
And what really stood out to me was this idea that inaccurate metadata can actually undermine the very things that AI is supposed to improve.
Totally.
Like efficiency and cost-effectiveness.
It might seem counterintuitive, but the document highlights how some Swedish municipalities have actually ended up buying information they already own.
What?
Simply because they couldn't find it in their own systems.
Oh, no.
The metadata was either missing, incomplete, or just plain wrong.
Wow.
So the data was essentially invisible.
So they're spending taxpayer money on data they already have.
Yeah.
Ouch, talk about adding insult to injury. But it really just kind of emphasizes the hidden costs of bad data management, right?
Absolutely.
It's not just about wasting money, it's wasting time, missed opportunities.
Exactly. And the implications go even further.
Okay.
The document also talks about the legal and ethical ramifications of AI making decisions that could impact citizens' rights and obligations based on faulty data.
Wow.
We're talking about the potential for bias, discrimination, and even violations of privacy.
That's scary.
It is.
So we need to be really sure that the data we're using, if we're going to trust AI to make these decisions, is accurate and reliable.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay.
And that's why I think the Swedish report is so valuable.
I agree.
It's a wake-up call, not just for governments, but for anyone who's working with data and AI.
For sure.
You know, we can't just assume that the data is good.
Right.
We need to prioritize metadata management. It's about building trust and making sure that AI is used responsibly.
Okay, so we've laid out the problem pretty clearly.
Yeah.
Inaccurate metadata is a recipe for disaster, especially when AI is involved.
For sure.
But this Swedish document doesn't just leave us hanging.
It doesn't.
They actually point towards some solutions.
Absolutely. And it's not just about fixing the metadata that we already have.
Okay.
They also emphasize the importance of collaboration.
Right.
Different organizations, government agencies, even private companies, they often hold pieces of the data puzzle.
Yeah.
And if they're not talking to each other, sharing information, ensuring consistency in their metadata practices, the problems are going to keep happening.
So it's like trying to put together a giant jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah.
Where everyone has a few pieces, But no one has the box top.
Yeah, exactly.
To see what the final picture is supposed to look like.
We need a more holistic approach, a shared understanding of what good metadata looks like, and a commitment to working together.
Totally.
To make that happen.
This all makes sense, but I'm a little stuck on how cleaning up metadata on a massive scale sounds really daunting.
It's definitely a challenge, but luckily some really cool new tools are coming out.
Oh, good.
That can help. And the Swedish report actually highlights one in particular.
Okay.
The ArcGIS Hub AI Assistant.
Ooh, AI to fix the AI problem? Now that's meta.
I know, right?
So tell me more.
What's so cool about this AI assistant is it can analyze these huge amounts of data, identify patterns and connections, and then present that information in a way that's understandable to us humans. It's like having a translator between this complex world of data and the people who need to use it.
So instead of staring at a giant spreadsheet full of numbers, this AI assistant can create maps and charts and summaries that help us understand what the data is telling us.
Exactly. It takes complex data sets that are maybe spread across different sources with messy metadata and turns it into insights that we can actually use.
I'm picturing a city planner trying to figure out where to build a new park. They could use this AI assistant to look at data on population density. Green spaces, traffic patterns, maybe even noise pollution. And instead of digging through tons of reports, they get clear visualizations that pinpoint the ideal location.
That's a great example. And it shows how the AI assistant can help make decision-making more efficient and more effective. It's not about replacing human judgment. It's about giving us better tools to make informed choices.
Okay, but hold on, we were just talking about collaboration. How does this AI assistant fit into that? Does it just work its magic in isolation?
Well, for the AI assistant to work well, it needs access to, you guessed it.
Good metadata.
Good metadata.
Okay.
And that often requires collaboration between different organizations.
For sure.
So in your park example, the city planner might need data from the parks department. The transportation department, maybe even environmental agencies. And the AI assistant can actually help make that collaboration happen by being a platform for sharing data and metadata across those different departments.
So it's not just about cleaning up your own metadata. It's about working together to create a more accurate picture that everyone can benefit from.
Precisely. And the AI assistant can even help standardize how metadata is collected. And organized, to make sure everyone's speaking the same data language, which is essential for making all these systems talk to each other.
This is starting to sound like a total game changer.
It is.
Not just for government agencies, but for anyone working with complex data. But does the Swedish report mention any other benefits of using this?
They do. They talk about how the AI assistant can make open data more accessible to citizens.
Because right now, a lot of government data is public, but it's buried in technical formats. That the average person can't understand.
Exactly. It's they're releasing the ingredients list, but not the actual recipe.
That's a good way to put it.
But the AI assistant can take that raw data and turn it into visualizations, summaries, and reports that anyone can understand. It lets citizens engage with the data, see how decisions are being made, and hold their leaders accountable.
That's a huge step towards transparency.
It is.
And accountability.
And it's not just about making data accessible. It's about educating people, helping them understand the power of data, and encouraging them to use it to improve their communities.
So we're going from data obscurity to data literacy. Where everyone feels empowered to engage with data. And use it to make a difference.
I love it.
This is all really exciting, but I have to be honest. A part of me is still a little skeptical. Can we really trust AI to make these decisions? What about bias? What about unintended consequences?
Those are really good points. And it's important to remember that AI is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. It all comes down to how it's developed, implemented, and overseen. We need to make sure that these AI systems are built with ethics and fairness in mind. That they're trained on unbiased data. And that their decisions are transparent and accountable.
So the problem isn't the AI itself, it's how we use it.
Exactly. And that's where metadata becomes so important. Accurate and comprehensive metadata lets us see how AI systems are making decisions. identify potential biases, and hold them accountable.
Gotcha.
It's about building trust and making sure AI is a force for good.
Which brings up something else that the Swedish document mentioned.
Okay.
Those legal and ethical considerations.
Yeah.
They specifically talk about the risks of AI making decisions that affect people's rights and obligations based on flawed data.
Right. That's a huge issue. Yeah. We have to be so careful about how we use AI in areas that can have such a big impact on people's lives.
Yeah.
And again, metadata is critical for lowering those risks.
Can you give me a specific example of how that might play out?
Sure. So imagine like an AI system is being used to figure out who qualifies for government assistance programs.
Okay.
If the data that was used to train the system is biased, or the metadata is messed up, like incomplete or inaccurate, the system can make like really unfair decisions and even exclude people who really need help.
So good metadata isn't just about like making things run smoothly.
Oh, right.
It's about fairness and making sure these systems actually help the people they're supposed to.
Exactly. It's about building systems we can trust.
Right.
And to do that, we need to know what data is being used, how it was collected, and what it means.
Okay.
That's where metadata comes in. It gives us that context.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here, from like what metadata even is to how bad things can get if we mess it up. But one thing that's been on my mind is we've been talking a lot about governments and big organizations.
Right.
But what about us, regular people? Where do we fit into this whole metadata thing?
That's a great question, and it gets to why this whole conversation is so important.
Okay.
AI is like everywhere in our lives now, even when we don't realize it.
Yeah.
It's the algorithms that control our social media feeds, the systems that recommend products or even decide if we get a loan. AI's role is just getting bigger.
And all these systems use data about us.
Exactly. Data that has its own metadata, its own story, and its own potential for bias and inaccuracy.
So as citizens, we need to understand how important data and metadata are.
Yes.
We need to be asking questions about how our data is collected, used, and protected.
Absolutely.
And we need to hold our leaders accountable for using data ethically.
I agree.
It's about becoming more data literate.
Yes.
And not just like blindly accepting how these systems work.
We need to think critically about data and see those potential biases and red flags.
Right.
And we need to demand transparency from those organizations that are using our data.
It's not about being data scientists ourselves.
Right.
It's about being informed citizens.
Absolutely.
In a world that's driven by data.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This is great because it's not about being overwhelmed by all this tech.
Yeah.
It's about taking control of our data.
Yes.
And making sure it's used the right way.
I love that. And that's something that the Swedish report really highlights.
Okay.
They see data literacy as crucial for a healthy democracy.
Makes sense.
Where people are engaged, informed, and able to hold their leaders accountable.
Okay, so to bring it back to the Swedish report.
Yeah.
And this whole AI and metadata discussion, what's the main takeaway here? What are they really hoping to achieve?
I think their main message is that AI has huge potential to make our lives better, but only if it's built on accurate and trustworthy data.
Right.
And that starts with getting the metadata right. It's not just some technical thing.
Yeah.
It's the key to building trust, ensuring fairness, and making sure AI is used for good.
That's a really important message.
It is.
And it's something we can all do something about.
Right.
Even if we're not like data experts.
Exactly.
We can all push for transparency, ask those questions, and learn more about the power of data.
Yeah.
Especially in the age of AI.
Well said. And for anyone who wants to learn more about these new tools and see how AI is changing how we use data, I recommend checking out the ArcGIS Hub AI Assistant.
I'll definitely check that out.
Put a link in the show notes.
Awesome.
It's a great example of how AI can actually empower us, not just confuse us.
I like that.
And it all comes back to that basic building block, metadata.
It all starts with the data.
Right. So next time you hear someone talking about AI and big data, remember, it's not just about algorithms and code.
Right.
It's about the data and the story it tells. I like that.
Get the data right, and you're one step closer to a future where AI really benefits everyone.
Well said. That's a great place to wrap up.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me for this deep dive into AI and metadata.
It was my pleasure.
And thanks to all of you for listening.